I heard the first laugh before the front door even closed behind me. It bounced off the hallway mirror and the family photos, hung like a net to catch me if I dared to float. Laughter, soft at first, then sharper, the kind that says, "We saw you," the kind that says, "We saw what you didn't bring." I walked in alone. Aunt Joan's house smelled like cinnamon, sage, and judgment. The chandelier above the entry hummed. My coat was still half on my arm when my cousin Derek called out from the living room, "Olivia, oh, did you bring anyone?" And there it was, the first smirk, the tilt of an eyebrow, a breath that paused just long enough to make room for pity. I put my coat on the hook and smiled. "Just me," I said. My smile didn't shake. I had practiced it in the car, in the mirror. In every empty room I'd learned to make feel like home. I had rehearsed my voice too. Calm, soft, the kind of voice that didn't need anyone else to be complete. From the kitchen, I heard the scrape of a carving knife. "Olivia's here," Mom called out. "Be nice." "Aren't we always?" Aunt Joan's voice floated back. She always smiled with teeth, always measured love like it was owed interest. I stepped into the living room. The television was on, low. A football game moved silently across the screen. My sister Maya sat on the far end of the couch with her knees tucked up and a glass of wine. Gold bracelets slid down her wrist as she waved at me and then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hi," she said, like the word had thorns. Ethan was there too. Ethan, the almost. He was by the bookshelf, pretending to study a framed photo of us as kids in a field. He wasn't family, not anymore. But he was family enough, through my sister now, and the story everyone retold when they were bored. He nodded at me, a nod that used to mean, "We'll laugh about this later," and now just meant, "You're still here." I found Nana Ruth in her favorite chair by the window. Her eyes were soft as always, blue-gray like winter skis, the kind that had seen everything and still believed the light comes back. When I leaned down to hug her, she squeezed my hand 3 times, our old code. "I love you," I did it back. "I love you, too." I took a breath. The room smelled like rosemary and apple pie and wet wool. I could feel the weight of the year on my shoulders like a shawl. But underneath that, something else. Something quiet and bright. A spark I'd kept safe even when the lights went out. "You look good," Dad said behind me. He always looked like he had just stepped out of a storm, gray at his temples, hands old from building things. His smile was small but real. "Thanks, Dad," I said. Derek sauntered over with a plate of olives. "So," he winked, "no +1, thought for sure you'd bring what's his face." I met his eyes. "I forgot his face," I said, and it landed in the room like a stone in a pond. Ripples, a cousin's snort, Maya's half-smile, Aunt Joan's satisfied hum like she'd just closed a deal. I set my bag on the sideboard. My phone was in there, and with it, a countdown. With it, the sound that would answer every smirk in this room, but not yet, not until it mattered. I turned to you, the person listening to me now, and my voice in my head whispered a promise to hold you close through this. If you're new here, you need to know something. I don't tell stories to get even. I tell them to make room, for breath, for truth, for the people like me who walk into laughing rooms and stand tall anyway. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what happens next? It doesn't just happen to me. It could happen to anyone who has ever been underestimated, left out, pushed aside. Anyone who was called too much or not enough on the same day. Dinner started soft. Mom fussed with napkins. She set a place for me at the end of the table. Derek sat beside me and across from us, Ethan and Maya. Aunt Joan took the head of the table like a throne. Uncle Paul carved the turkey like he was doing surgery on something that didn't deserve mercy. Jokes flew light and mean at the same time. Memory is a slow camera. It picked up the water ring on the wood, the flicker of a candle, the sheen on a crystal glass. It picked up Maya's bracelet, catching the light. It picked up the tiny white scar on my palm from the day I broke a glass and decided to stop apologizing for bleeding. "I heard you've been freelancing," Aunt Joan said as she spooned potatoes with butter that glowed. "That must be exciting." "It is," I said. Must be nice to, Derek added. Work in pajamas. I smiled. Sometimes. Ethan cleared his throat. I always said Olivia would land on her feet, he told the table, like he was a teacher giving a gold star. She's resilient. Maya's wine glass paused at her lips. Her eyes flicked between us. She wanted to say something, I could feel it, but she didn't, she just sipped. I folded my napkin in half. Nana's hand found my knee under the table. The tablecloth had tiny embroidered leaves. She made it in '86. She made everything we used to gather on. This house was her sister, but Nana's hands were in every stitch of it. I was alone at the table. Yes, that was true, but I was not empty. Aunt Joan lifted her glass for a toast. To family, she said. To new chapters, to choosing wisely. Glasses clinked. Mine touched no one's. And then there it was, a sound from my bag by the sideboard, clean, bright, like a bell waking up a night sky. I didn't move. Everyone else did. What was that? Maya asked. Is that your phone? Mom called from the kitchen. That was new, Derek said, eyebrows up. I stared at my plate. The sound came again, 2 notes, then a soft vibration. The hairs on my arms lifted. If you've ever waited for a signal that only you understand, you know the feeling. It buzzes in your teeth. It tastes like metal and hope. Aunt Joan frowned. Olivia, are you expecting someone? I looked up then, straight across the table, into eyes that had watched me cry, watched me beg, watched me leave. I let a small, slow smile spread across my face. Not someone, I said, something. I stood, walked to the sideboard, and lifted the flap of my bag. The screen lit my face a gentle blue. The notification was already there, right where I knew it would be. Quiet skis, your aircraft is prepped. Crew is ready, wheels up in 45 minutes. I didn't mean to show them, not yet, but the glow bounced off the silver tray and Derek leaned over too far, curious. He saw, then Maya saw, then Ethan. What is that? Derek breathed. A ride, I said simply, and a promise kept. I put the phone back in my bag and turned back to the table, the sound still humming in my chest. That sound wasn't just a buzz. It was a door opening. It was the end of one story and the glittering edge of another. If you're wondering how I got here, alone, yes, and also not alone at all, let me take you back. This isn't about a jet. It's about what it took to be the kind of woman who didn't flinch when it was time to board one. The night after last Thanksgiving, I slept on the floor. Don't ask me why. There was a bed. There was a couch. But the floor felt honest. The floor didn't pretend to hold you up softly. It just took you as you were. It had been the worst holiday of my life. We had come to Aunt Joan's just like always. I had Ethan beside me then. He held my hand under the table. He squeezed when Uncle Paul told the story of the time I spilled cranberry sauce all over the white rug and cried for an hour. He kissed my temple in the hallway. He looked at me like I was his next breath. And then in the kitchen, between the pies and the sweet potatoes, he went quiet. He set his plate down and said, I can't do this. 4 words, that's all. I can't do this. He didn't mean the dish. He meant us. He meant the ring we had picked out. He meant the apartment we had put a deposit on. He meant every promise I had stitched into our days like a seam no one could see. He said he was sorry. He said he felt trapped. He said it wasn't me. He said he needed space. Aunt Joan heard. She called for Maya. Mom walked in and put a hand over her mouth. Dad stood in the doorway and stared like he was watching a house he built tilt. I took the ring off, set it on the counter next to the apple pie. My fingers were shaking so hard it rattled the pie server. Maya stepped closer. Her eyes were wide. She had always been the pretty one, the shiny one, the one people forgave without asking what for. She hugged me and I felt her inhale my hair. It'll be okay, she whispered. I drove home alone. 2 weeks later, Ethan bumped into my sister at a market and sent me a text. Hope you're not mad. It's not like that. You know how it is. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I shut my phone off and went for a walk in the cold. My breath fogged the air. My cheeks burned. I passed windows with families inside and the taste of sugar in the air. I kept moving until my toes went numb. I lost my job in January, not because I was bad at it, because my cousin Derek, who worked in the same building, whispered to the right person that I was distracted. I wasn't sleeping. I would stare at my coffee and try to remember what it was for. I would open emails and close them again like wounds. They let me go on a Tuesday. I walked home on a street that felt different when you didn't know where you were going anymore. The same old building with the grocery store on the corner. The same cat on the steps across the way. But I walked slower, like the air had thickened. The landlord raised the rent in February. I moved to a studio with a window that faced a brick wall. It was small and loud and mine. I put my mattress on the floor and my desk by the window. I made noodles and reminded myself how to eat. I stacked books. I bought a tiny plant and prayed it would live. People always think the worst part of heartbreak is the end. It is. It's the days after. It's the ordinary things that hurt because they used to be shared. It's the music you can't listen to because it pulls your chest open. It's the jokes you can't tell because the person who knew why they were funny is gone. I worked odd jobs, editing, data entry, a tiny website for a bakery that paid me in cash and cupcakes. I started to breathe again in March. In April, Nana called. "Baby girl," she said, "come over, bring your laptop." I did. She made tea. The house was the same as always, even the crack in the tile by the stove that Mom always meant to fix. Nana showed me a box, not fancy, just a shoebox covered in fabric that had faded where the sun hit. Inside, old papers, photos, a letter from 1979, the title to a farm we sold when I was 8. She put one document in my hand and watched my face. "Your grandfather," she said softly, "left things in trust. He was careful, but people get hungry, people get tired, and sometimes people who look like us don't protect us." I didn't know what she meant until I read the words. My name, in a clause in the tiniest print, and then Nana's name, and then Aunt Joan. My heart crawled into my throat. "Nana," I whispered, "what is this?" She sighed. Her hands were thin now, but still warm. "It's a net," she said, "one they meant to use to catch you if you flew too high." She told me about meetings I had never been invited to, about decisions made at kitchen tables without me, about signatures that didn't look like the ones I knew by heart, about a farmhouse with a deed that wasn't clean and a trust account that didn't add up. "I'm tired," she said. "I want to sleep knowing you have what your grandfather wanted for you." I held her hand. "I'll fix it," I said before I knew how. "I'll find a way." I started going to the library to read case law like poetry with all the vowels taken out. I made notes I barely understood. I called a friend I used to know who was an intern at a legal clinic. "Find me a woman who doesn't flinch," I told him. "Find me a woman who knows how to hold a line." He connected me with Ms. Delgado. She had sharp eyes and slow speech. She listened to my story without interrupting once. When I was done, she slid a pad of paper toward me. "Make a list," she said. "Not of what they did, of what you want." I wanted Nana safe. I wanted the lies to stop. I wanted my name back. At night, after emails and spreadsheets and invoices, I taught myself things I didn't think I'd ever need. I learned the difference between a deed and a title, between a trust and a trap. And when my brain melted, I learned something else too. I learned how to build again. It started with a simple job, a travel calendar for a small charter company called Sky Harbor Group. They paid me in 2 checks that cleared 3 days late, but they sent my name to a friend at a new app that wanted help with their back end. "It's messy," the founder admitted over coffee. "We just need someone who can think clearly when everything's on fire." Fire, I knew fire. I said yes. The app was called Route Sky then. The idea was simple: help travelers find last-minute seats on empty flights to save money and reduce waste. Their code was a patchwork quilt of favors and half-finished dreams. I sat at my tiny desk by the brick wall and stitched until it held. I didn't understand then that I would be stitching myself too. That each bug I fixed would be like pulling a thorn out of my own skin. That each crash I prevented would be like stopping my own fall. By June, I was sleeping again. By July, I could run without feeling like my heart was going to break open. By August, I had something I hadn't had in months. A plan. When the engagement photos dropped in September, my sister's dress the color of champagne, her smile cut like glass. Ethan's hand on her waist like it had always belonged. My phone lit up like a storm. I didn't know they were going to make it public then. I found out the way everyone else did, through a post, through confetti emojis, through love hearts from people I hadn't seen since high school. Wow, Derek texted me, did you know? I stared at the screen. The photo was absurd in its perfection. A sunset, a field, a dog. It was cruel because it was almost exactly the photo I had wanted. I felt my throat tighten. Tears came hot and fast. I let them burn, and then I breathed. I didn't reply to Derek. I didn't call Maya. I put my phone face down and opened my laptop. That day, Rootsky crashed under a wave of new users. A celebrity had mentioned the app on a podcast. People liked the idea of not wasting seats. They liked the idea of slipping through the air without paying for velvet ropes. The system buckled. The servers groaned. The founder panicked. I ordered noodles. I took a shower, I tied my hair back, and I got to work. I had always been good at seeing patterns in noise. I could hear what a system needed when everyone else just heard static. I looked at the logs. I found the fragile places. I said, "It's okay," out loud to a machine that didn't know me. I focused until I forgot what time it was. At 2 a.m, the app stabilized. The graphs were smooth again. The chat went quiet. I went to the window and looked out at the brick wall and whispered, "You did it!" Not just to the app, to me. The next day, the founder sent me an email. "We want to bring you on as more than a contractor," she wrote. "You saved our skin." She offered me a small salary and something else. Equity, not a lot, but enough to feel like a promise, enough to feel like a key. I said yes, and then I made a decision I didn't tell anyone but Nana. We needed to pivot. The idea was good, but there was a better one humming underneath it, like a bass line no one had turned up yet. Empty legs, that's what they call them in aviation. When a private jet flies to pick someone up or return to base without anyone on board. Those flights are wasteful. They cost money. They create noise. But what if they didn't have to? What if the seats on those empty legs could be found, booked, and shared by people who weren't wearing diamonds or a name someone else gave them? What if luxury didn't have to be a closed door? What if efficiency could feel like freedom? I took my messy idea to the founder. "We need a new name," I said. "We need something that doesn't sound like a carpool. We need something that sounds like night air and quiet cabins and knowing you did something smart." She raised an eyebrow. "You have a name." I smiled. "Quiet Skis." She sat back, looked at the ceiling, and laughed. "Of course you do," she said. "Okay, build me a prototype." I did. I built something that whispered instead of shouted. I built a simple, clean place where pilots could post empty legs and vetted members could grab a seat at a price that didn't make you want to hide your tax returns. I made the notifications sound like bells, not alarms. I made the app save you time, not steal it. I made it mine. We tested with a handful of users. It worked. It wasn't perfect, but it sang. All the while, the other half of my life tightened with secrets. I had proof now. Proof of what Aunt Joan and Uncle Paul had done with the trust. Ms. Delgado helped me request records. She helped me read the ones we got back. There were gaps. There were checks that didn't add up. There were transfers that looked like snow covering tracks. One night, Derek called me. "We should talk," he said, "over drinks." "I don't drink with people who lie to me," I said, and let the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. "I found something you might want to see," he pressed. "You wouldn't want this getting out." He sent me screenshots of my own pitch deck. The deck I had sent to the founder of Rootsky months ago when I first suggested Quiet Skis. He'd gotten it off an old shared drive we used years before when we were both at a different company. He'd forwarded it to a competitor. That competitor used 2 of my slides, my words, my design, without change. I felt cold as a lake in winter. "You stole from me," I said. He laughed. "Everyone steals." I hung up. Then I called Ms. Delgado. She made notes. She said, "Stay calm, document everything. It helps to keep your hands clean when they start throwing mud." Maya texted me the next morning. She wanted to meet. She sent a coffee cup emoji. I stared at it like it was a threat, but I went. We sat by a window. Her hands shook when she lifted her cup. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," she said finally. "We didn't mean to hurt you." My back pressed into the chair. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and maybe mercy. "If you didn't mean to hurt me," I said, slow and even, "you wouldn't have done it in secret." She winced. "We didn't want to make a big deal out of it until we were sure." "Until you were sure you wanted to keep going with him," I corrected. She swallowed. "He understands me." The laugh that escaped me wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel either. It was tired. "He understood me too," I said, "until he didn't." She reached across the table. I didn't move. "I miss you," she said. Tears filled her eyes. "You're my sister." I softened because my heart is not a stone even when I wish it were. "I miss you too," I said, "but you picked him, and then you hid." She wiped her face. "I'm engaged," she whispered, like she was ashamed of it. "I wanted you to hear it from me." "You posted it," I wanted to say, but I didn't. I nodded. "Okay." When I left, I leaned against the brick outside and stared at a sky that looked like it was made of tin. I could be cruel about this, I thought, but cruelty never looks as good as people think. It ages you like cigarette smoke. I walked to Nana and let myself in with the key. She was in the living room with her quilt frame, needle moving slow and sure. "Sit," she said. "Tell me." I sat. I told her everything. She listened. When I was done, she set her needle down. "Child," she said, "people who break trust always tell themselves it's not breaking if they don't hear the sound. You heard it. That's why it hurts." I rested my head on her shoulder like I used to when I was 5. "I want to do this right," I said. "I want to do it clean." "Then do it," she said. "Wait for the right moment, and don't warn them. People who choose not to hear the bell shouldn't get to ask you to ring it quietly." That night I booked something, a test. Quiet Skis had a partner with a small fleet and a friendly operations manager who liked our idea. Their name was Night Star Aviation. They had a hop to the county seat every other day. Our court's old building closed for the holiday, then opened on Black Friday morning for emergency orders only. Ms. Delgado told me if we wanted to stop the sale Aunt Joan had scheduled for the Monday after, we'd need to file first thing Friday in person. No delays. No excuses. Commercial flights were packed. Buses were late. Roads were a mess. But there was a Night Star empty leg that could land us 20 minutes from the courthouse at dawn. I tested a booking on the app. It went through. I set a reminder. Then I set another. When the confirmation pinged, the notification sound I had helped design played soft and clear. 2 notes, then a hush. I pressed my thumb against the glass and watched the light reflect in my eyes. "This isn't about revenge," I told my reflection. "This is about the truth in daylight." But I'd be lying if I said the sound didn't feel like a small, perfect strike of lightning in my chest. The week before Thanksgiving, the mail brought a letter that wasn't a letter. It was an invitation, heavy paper, gold edges, floated words like confetti, gratitude, gathering, family. The card smelled faintly of lilac as if to suggest kindness by scent alone. Aunt Joan's name at the bottom, so glad to host. Bring a dish, bring your best self. I laughed. I texted Nana a photo. She texted back a string of hearts and then, "Come anyway, I need your eyes there, promise me." I promised. I am good at keeping promises. Ms. Delgado and I met on Tuesday in a room with fluorescent lights that made everyone look like a ghost. She spread everything out, copies, tabs, sticky notes, a plan. "You will go," she said, tapping a nail against the timeline. "You will watch, you will say nothing. At 6:30 p.m. you will say your piece. At 6:45 you will leave. At 7:00 your ride will meet you. At dawn we will be at the courthouse. At 8:15 we will file. At 8:45 we'll see a judge." I nodded. The outline was a lifeline. I folded it into my bag like a talisman. "What if they try to stop me?" I asked. She smiled, dry and bright. "They can try to stop you from using the bathroom. she said. They can't stop you from walking out a door. She handed me one more thing, a flash drive. If they try to pretend you're crazy, she said, play this. It's the recorded call with the notary. It's enough for now. I left the office and walked to a consignment shop on the corner. I have never been the kind of woman who needed a new dress to feel like a new person, but I wanted something that would remind me of what I already was. Steady, quiet, stunning in my own way. I found it on the second rack. Midnight blue. Simple. It made me think of the night above the ocean in a window seat when everyone else is asleep and you are the only one awake with the stars. I tried it on and looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had learned to stand alone without leaning. I bought it. I took it home. I hung it from a nail above my desk like a flag. On Wednesday night, I cooked. Not much, just enough to show respect. I made green beans with lemon and almonds because Nana likes them. I made a pie from her recipe book, the one with grease on the corners and notes in the margins. I rolled the crust and whispered, "It's going to be okay," like I was saying it to the dough and to me. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan, "Are we good?" I stared at it. He had no right to that question. Not now. Not after months of silence. Not after the posts and the accidental run-ins, the stories he told about me being strong like he had built the muscles himself. I typed and erased. Then I put the phone face down. You don't owe anyone an answer you don't want to give. When I woke up on Thanksgiving morning, the world looked like it had been sugar-dusted. Frost on the cars, breath like smoke. I took a shower long enough to steam the room. I wrapped my hair in a towel. I stood in front of the mirror with the navy dress. When I pulled it over my head, it slid into place like it had been waiting. I pinned small pearl earrings to my ears. Nana's, I tied the laces on my boots. Practical, quiet, strong. I slipped the flash drive into my bag, the folder with the documents, the timeline. I double-checked the Quiet Skis app. The Nightstar crew confirmed again, your aircraft is prepped. Crew is ready, wheels up in 45 minutes. The notification sound chimed when I tested it, soft bell, soft hush, like a heartbeat. I smiled. I took a picture of myself in the mirror and sent it to Nana. Her reply came right away, my girl, the prettiest storm I ever saw. I drove slow. The roads were slick with cold sunlight. I listened to music I used to play when I was small. Songs that smelled like retro radios and warm kitchens. I was almost to Aunt Jones when my phone rang on the car's speaker. Mom. "Hi, baby," she said. "Drive safe." "I am," I said. We didn't say more. She wanted to ask me not to fight. I wanted to ask her to choose me. We both chose silence because sometimes that is the only thing that keeps the wheels on. I pulled into the driveway and saw them all. The cars, the wreath on the door, the bird feeder dripping seeds onto the frost. I cut the engine and sat for a second, hands on the wheel, breathing. I thought of last year, the ring on the counter, the smell of apple pie mixed with dread. I thought of this year, the flash drive, the plan, the bell. When I stepped inside, I became a shape in a scene. Everyone in position. Everyone holding their lines. Derek with his jokes. Aunt Joan with her smile sharp as a tiger. Maya with her bracelet catching the light. Ethan trying to look like a hurt little boy instead of a man who had chosen his own comfort over my heart. I stood where I belonged. I was not at the head of the table, not in the middle of the room. I was at the end, but I was okay with that. My power wasn't in the chair. It was in what I had brought that no one could see. Dinner unfolded. Bites, murmurs, stares like tiny knives that only nicked if you let them. "So," Aunt Joan said sweetly, "any news you want to share, Olivia? New job, new partner." She didn't look at Ethan when she said it, but she wanted me to. So I didn't. "Nothing you'd be interested in," I said gently. "It's quiet." "Quiet can be code for nothing," Derek joked. "Don't you think?" Nana squeezed my knee. My smile didn't move. "It can also be code for peace," I said. "I like peace." We got to dessert. The pie waited on the sideboard. The plate with the ring memory had been put away. I stood to help Mom. She shooed me. "Sit," she said. "You're a guest." We both heard the ghost in that word. I used to be home here. Now I was a guest. I sat. I laid my hands on the tablecloth Nana made. I watched droplets of wax slip down the sides of candles like slow tears. I listened to the song playing low on the speaker, something about home and snow and promises. And then the bell. Soft, clear, like a secret set free. Everyone looked at me. "What is that?" Aunt Joan asked, smile snagging. My hand moved to my bag like it had done 1,000 times this year, but this time I wasn't hiding. I took my phone out and let the screen light the air between us. "Quiet skis, your aircraft is prepped. Crew is ready, wheels up in 45 minutes. Maya leaned forward. "Is that what I think it is?" "What do you think it is?" I asked, head tilted. "A taxi," Derek laughed, but even his laughter sounded thin now. I set the phone down next to my plate. "It's a ride," I said, "and before I go, I have something for the family." I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive. I held it up. It caught the candlelight and gleamed. I stood, walked to the television, slid the drive into the port. The screen blinked. The family chat quieted like a forest when a hawk passes overhead. "What are you doing?" Aunt Joan's voice had a wobble at the end, like a high note breaking. I looked at Nana. She nodded once, slow, steady. I turned back to the screen, took the remote and pressed play. The room filled with a voice that was not mine, and yet carried my life in it. "This is the notary on record for the Carter Family Trust. Yes, Ms. Delgado, the documents you sent match the copies we stamped. No, those signatures are not the same as the ones we have on file from 2010. The sound landed in the room like truth in a temple. I turned to my family. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot and fast and burns out. I was something else. I was winter water. Clear, cold, deep. "We're going to talk now," I said. "And then I'm going to leave. And in the morning, I'm going to file for an injunction to stop the sale you tried to push through. I am going to use the trust my grandfather left the way he intended. I am going to keep Nana safe." Aunt Joan rose to her feet, knocking her chair back so hard it scraped the wood. "How dare you?" I held up my hand. "I'm not asking," I said softly. "I'm telling." The bell in my bag chimed again. 2 notes, then a hush. I let it ring. And I watched the people who had laughed when I walked in feel, for the first time, what it was like to be quiet when the most important person in the room finally spoke. The room cracked before the screen even finished the first sentence. You could hear it, first in the clink of a fork against a plate that wasn't hungry anymore, then in the way Aunt Joan's throat cleared like she was spitting out a seed she hadn't meant to swallow. Uncle Paul's mouth went thin. Derek set his glass down too hard and pretended it was on purpose. Maya's eyes found mine, pleading, as if my gaze could be a bandage. On the TV, the notary's voice stayed steady. "No, those signatures are not the same as the ones we have on file from 2010. Yes, the dates are altered in a way that would require an explanation." Aunt Joan tried to laugh. It sounded like ice in a blender. "Olivia, this is inappropriate," she said, like we were in a church. "Is it?" I asked, because I thought this was family. Uncle Paul reached for the remote. Dad's hand got there first. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just set the remote on the table away from everyone and folded his hands like he was keeping them from shaking. His voice was low. "Let her speak." Maya set her glass down. The bracelet on her wrist slid and caught the candlelight like a flare. "Liv," she whispered. "Let me finish," I said, and the softness in my voice surprised even me. I was not here to shout. I was here to make something straight that had been bent so long we forgot what straight looked like. I clicked pause. The room held its breath. "Here, what's going to happen?" I said. "Tomorrow morning, we will be in court to file an emergency order to stop the sale on Monday. Ms. Delgado, our counsel, will present the recording you're hearing. She will also present the statement from the bank and the letter from the accountant you hired, Aunt Joan. The one who registered your consulting company the same month the trust started covering expenses that look a lot like your country club dues." The color in Aunt Joan's face shifted, pink to white to something mean. "How dare you accuse?" "I'm not accusing," I said gently. "I'm reading." Derek leaned back in his chair and gave me a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Wow, so this is your big moment? You found Google and a lawyer? Newsflash, families make deals. People borrow. Things get fluid. Fluid is a word people use when they want water to act like a wall, I said. It never does. Ethan stood. He hovered like a ghost by the sideboard. Maybe we should talk in another room. This is Thanksgiving. Oh, now you care about rooms, I said, and a couple of heads turned, trying not to smile. It wasn't mean. It was true. We'll keep it here. It started here. I pulled a folder from my bag. I had labeled it in my neatest handwriting because neatness is the first thing that tells a scared brain you're not lost. Here, I said, laying copies on the table one by one. The trust terms, the original signatures, the ledger, the wire that went to JJ Consulting, that's you, Aunt Joan, the transfer back when the market dipped, the one that never came. Uncle Paul's jaw worked. You don't understand how these things work, he said. We have had obligations. We covered things for your mother for the house. You benefited. Mom flinched like the word had a hook. I met her eyes. Did I asked softly. Because all I remember is asking questions and being told to be grateful for rooms I wasn't allowed to sit in. Nana's hand found mine. 3 squeezes. I love you. My throat tightened. I squeezed back. I love you too. Aunt Joan leaned forward, palms on the table, smile sliding right off her face. You are ungrateful, she said. You have always been ungrateful. We kept this family together when your father couldn't hold a job and your mother couldn't say no to anyone. We made this house a place. We made holidays. We hid your messes. We let you bring strays. And now you stand in my home and call me a thief. No, I said quietly. I call you what the numbers call you. Derek laughed, high and brittle. She's rehearsed that line, he said to Ethan. Ethan wouldn't look at him. Ethan was busy trying to look like a man who had not told me he loved me in this very kitchen, between the pie and the sink. He glanced at Maya. She sat very still. Derek, I said, turning to him, while we're talking about names, I have one for you too. He raised an eyebrow. Can't wait. Thief, I said, the word gentle as a folded note. You took my deck from an old shared drive and sent it to JetShare. It wasn't even good, he scoffed. They barely used it. They used enough to make the logo look like mine and the tagline word for word, I replied. I slid a printout across the table. Same font, same line, same angle. Derek went quiet the way a room goes quiet when a fuse blows. Nana's voice came then, softer than the candles, stronger than the chandelier. Ruth, Aunt Joan snapped, like Nana had misbehaved as a child, but Nana didn't look at her. She looked at me. Are you safe? She asked. Yes, I said. I am now. Good, Nana nodded. Then finish. I breathed. The detail in the room sharpened. The halo around the candle flames, the grain in the wood, the small scratch in the corner of the TV from when Derek threw a controller in 2008. I turned to Mom. I'm not doing this to embarrass you, I said. I'm doing it because you always told me the truth doesn't break us. Lies do. Mom's eyes went wet. She nodded once like a vow. I'm not asking to be in charge, I continued. I'm asking for transparency. I'm asking that Aunt Joan step down as trustee, effective immediately, and that we appoint a neutral administrator. I'm asking for a full accounting. I'm asking that the sale of the farm be halted until a judge reviews these records. I'm asking that Nana's needs come first, because they always should have. Uncle Paul exhaled through his nose like a bull that's tired of charging. And if we say no? I slid one more paper onto the table. It wasn't a threat, it was a schedule. Then tomorrow, I said, a judge will say it for you. Silence, the kind that carries weight. The notary's voice was still frozen on the screen, as if even the recording knew this was bigger than a file. Aunt Joan laughed again, but it sounded like choking. If you walk out that door, don't come back, she said. You want to be alone, be alone. My phone chimed. 2 notes, soft, a hush. I picked it up, looked at the screen, and then at the table of people who loved me like a mirror, only when I stood still and smiled. I placed the phone face up. Quiet skis, Crew ready, wheels up in 45 minutes. I took a breath and I smiled, not because I was winning, but because I was done losing. I will never be alone, I said. Not the way you think, not anymore. The first person to move was Derek. He lunged not at me, but at the TV. Dad stood faster than I'd ever seen him stand and put a hand on the set, not rough, firm. No, he said. Derek stopped, more surprised than blocked. He had forgotten my father wasn't made of fog. Ethan tried again, softer, like he could play the part of the peacekeeper because he had paid for his ticket with regret. Olivia, he said, none of this is going to land the way you think. Courts, they take forever. Families survive because we don't put each other on blast. Families survive because we don't lie, I answered, and because we don't take what isn't ours. Maya stood too. She looked like she might be sick. Joan, she said, turning to our aunt, did you really? The country club. Aunt Joan's smile snapped back into place, brittle porcelain. I did what needed to be done to keep the family from looking poor, she said. Do you think people help poor families? They don't. They pity them. They stop inviting them. They stop taking calls. Appearances matter. Do they matter more than Nana? I asked. It wasn't a trick question. It was the only one that counted. Nana's hands were folded in her lap. The skin was thin enough to see river veins underneath. I was fine with pitiful, she murmured. We always built our own tables anyway. Mom started to cry for real then, not pretty tears, real ones. She covered her face with her hands. I should have seen, she whispered through her fingers. I should have asked more questions. You asked the questions, Aunt Joan snapped. You didn't understand the answers. I understand now, Mom said, lowering her hands. I understand my daughter isn't making this up to hurt you. Uncle Paul puffed up like a coat that didn't fit anymore. Enough, he barked, trying to sound like the sound would fix it. Olivia, you leave that drive here. We'll review with counsel. We'll get ahead of this. You won't get ahead of anything by hiding it, I said. I walked to the TV and slid the flash drive out. It was warm. Truth usually is. I tucked it into the small zip pocket in my bag, the one where I kept jewelry and hope. Besides, you don't have the only copy. Derek scoffed. Of course she doesn't. Maya reached for me. Liv, she said, voice low, please, if you go public. I'm not going public, I said. I'm going legal, big difference. She swallowed. I don't want you to hate me. I looked at my sister. The girl I shared a room with, the girl who danced in the rain with me when we were 6, the girl who tried to be small so boys wouldn't think she was too much and then tried to be big so men would think she was enough. I don't hate you, I said. I don't know how to do that. I am mad at you. And I will be for a while, but mad is not forever. This, I gestured to the table, the screen, the lies, doesn't get to be forever either. She nodded, lips pressed so tight they went colorless. Her eyes moved to Ethan like she couldn't help it. Mine didn't. His shape was a shadow in my peripheral vision. He had already taken enough of the center of my view. Olivia, Aunt Joan said, last try, sugar on gravel. You don't know the whole story. I know enough of it to stop the harm, I said. If there's more, bring it to the light. If you're right, the light won't hurt you. The room waited for me to break. I didn't. I reached for my coat. It slid over the navy dress like the night closing over the ocean. I lifted my bag. Dad moved to the end of the table and rounded it slow, like each step mattered. He stopped in front of me. For a second, his face did that thing faces do right before they bend under the weight of love. Then he pulled me into him and held me the way he had when I was 7 and scraped my knees on gravel. His voice was at my ear. I'm proud of you, he said. My chest cracked in a good way. Thanks, Dad, I said, and I sounded like my mother when she was young and still brave enough to ask for more. Mom came next. She pressed her forehead to mine. Be careful, she whispered, and call me when you land. I will, I promised. Nana didn't stand. Her hands stayed folded, but her eyes were the strongest thing in the room. I bent to her. She kissed my cheek. This is the right road, she said. It will feel lonely, it is. I felt a hand on my elbow. Ethan, of course. He had always been good at finding a closeness that didn't belong to him. Can we talk outside? He murmured. No, I said. We said everything already, you just didn't hear it. Something flickered in his jaw. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, as if intentions were a shield that protected him from consequences. You did anyway, I answered. That's the part you keep skipping. He stepped back. You're different, he said, as if that was an accusation. I am, I said, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Derek made a low sound like a threat he hadn't grown into. If you go through with this, he muttered, you'll regret it. I turned. I regret not doing it sooner, I said. That's the only regret I'll keep. Aunt Joan pointed at the door like a queen banishing a subject. You walk out, she said. You're out. I looked past her, past the chandeliers and the photos and the lace and the lies. You can't exile someone who built her own door, I said. Watch. I moved to the entry. The coat rack still wobbled. The mirror still held the room at an angle. I slipped my keys into my pocket. The phone buzzed in my bag, 2 notes. A hush. I opened the front door. Cold air spilled in, crisp as an apple bite. I turned as if the room had something else to say. It didn't, not anything new. Good night, I said. Happy Thanksgiving. No one said it back. It didn't hurt the way you think. It hurt like pulling a splinter. Sharp, clean, free after. Outside, frost crackled under my boots. The sky was black blue, a color that only exists when the night is almost ready to let go. My breath fogged like speech bubbles in a comic. I walked to my car, got in, set my bag on the passenger seat, and put both hands on the wheel. My fingers shook the tiniest bit. I exhaled and then laughed, quiet real, not because it was funny, because the night felt different than it had 1 hour ago. It felt like mine. I tapped out a text to Ms. Delgado, leaving, see you at dawn. Her reply came fast, safe travels, we're ready. I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see silhouettes moving, frantic, circling like bees when someone knocks the hive. I could have stayed to soothe, to explain, to negotiate. I have done that my whole life. Tonight, I didn't. I put the car in drive. The tires crunched on frost. The radio came on low, someone singing about roads and home and how those words can mean the same thing on different days. I turned it down and listened to my own engine. It sounded healthy. So did I. The airport wasn't far, but it felt like another country. The road cut through sleeping neighborhoods and then opened into wide lanes with blue lights blinking along the edges like runway stars. I followed signs to a small building with tall glass doors and a lit wreath in the window. The letters above it read, Night Star Aviation. Inside, warmth, the kind that doesn't brag. A coffee station stamped a tiny smile of steam into the air. A man in a navy sweater looked up from the desk and smiled like he'd been expecting me since summer. Ms. Carter, he asked. Yes, I said, and my voice sounded like it had put a stone down. Welcome, he said, coming around the counter. I'm Ben Cruz ready, just like your app says. He winked at that, not smirking, winking, like we had a secret that made the world a little easier. Can I take your bag? I've got it, I said. He nodded. If you need anything, snacks, water, a minute, that's your couch. He motioned to a soft brown sofa near the window. Beyond it, the tarmac. A small jet waited in a pool of light, white skin gleaming, tail number neat, steps down like a promise. A woman crossed the lobby from the door to the flight line. She was bundled in a black coat, hair tucked into a knit hat, boots that looked like they had places to go. She looked about my age. She smiled, tired and real. Red eye to a double shift, she said, lifting her coffee and a little toast. I'm a nurse. Court date at dawn, I said. I'm a granddaughter. She laughed. Good job title. We sat for a minute like travelers do, a temporary pair, a small warmth in a big night. Then Ben called our names. Outside, the cold bit without malice. On the ramp, the jet was quieter than I expected. The staircase was narrower, the carpet softer. At the top, a woman in a navy uniform waited with a smile that made you feel like you had just done something smart. Good evening, Ms. Carter, she said. I'm Kay, your cabin attendant. Captain West and First Officer Lynn are up front. We'll be airborne in about 10 minutes. Can I take your coat? Thank you. I said, handing it over. Inside, everything was small and gentle. Seats the color of oatmeal. A little aisle, windows like shy eyes. A tray set with 2 water bottles, a small dish of almonds, napkins folded into crisp white triangles. Someone had tucked a little card by my seat. Handwritten, "Quiet Skis X Night Star, we're glad you're here." I ran my fingers over the letters. My throat tightened again in a new way, not with hurt, with gratitude. The nurse slid into the seat opposite me. "Never gets old," she said, nodding toward the window. "What does?" I asked. "Being above the things you can't fix yet," she said. "It doesn't solve it, but it helps you see the road." Kay offered to hang our bags. I kept mine by my feet and slid a hand into the side pocket to feel the flash drive. Warm. There. Real. I put my phone on airplane mode and then on my lap face down. The screen was a door. It could wait. The cockpit door opened and a man in a crisp white shirt with gold bars on his shoulders stepped back into the cabin. "Evening," he said, voice low and easy. "I'm Captain West. Weather is smooth. We'll climb to 33,000. About a 45-minute hop. You'll barely have time to close your eyes. Ms. Carter, Ms. Nguyen." He nodded to the nurse. "If you need anything, Kay will take good care of you." "Thanks, Captain," I said. He smiled and slipped back to the front. Kay did a short safety talk, her hands sure, her voice clear. Seatbelt. Exits. Life vest in case of a water landing we wouldn't see. The kind of talk that always sounds like common sense until you need it, and then it sounds like a prayer. We taxied. The runway lights lined up like a necklace someone had laid down on black velvet. I felt the engines wake up, a low, building hum that made the seat vibrate under my bones. The nurse closed her eyes. I watched the edge of the runway come closer, then drop away. We lifted. The city fell back, string lights of streets and homes shrinking into patterns you can't see when you're on them. The stars felt closer than the ground. Gravity loosened its grip, just enough to remind me I was more than the weight I carried. I exhaled. I had not realized I'd been holding my breath for a year. "What would you carry?" I thought, looking at the dark, soft curve of the earth, "if no one could weigh your luggage?" Kay placed a mug of tea at my elbow. Lemon, honey, the steam unfurled like silk. "On us," she said softly. "You look like you could use something warm." "Thank you," I whispered. I curled my hands around the mug and let the heat steady me. The nurse spoke without opening her eyes. "You'll win," she said. "You sound like a person who brings receipts." I laughed. "I bring tabs and staples." "And you have a grandmother who squeezes your hand 3 times, she added, eyes still closed. "That's good luck." "How did you?" "My Nana did it," she said. "Before surgeries, before storms." We went quiet. The cabin hummed. The plane cut a path through the dark like a needle through fabric, stitching sky to sky. I pulled my notebook from my bag. The cover was worn at the corners. On the first page, months ago, I had written a single sentence: "Build something you can live inside." Tonight, I wrote under it, "And leave the doors unlocked for the right ones." My phone lit up on the table for a second, even in airplane mode, one of those little blips that gets through when towers cross hands. A preview flashed and faded. My chest tightened. "Maya, please, call me when you land." I stared at the blank space where the words had been. The world turned under us. I closed my eyes and saw candles, a lake of faces, a door opening. I fell asleep for 23 minutes and dreamed of the farm before it was a fight, just a field in daylight, wind arriving like a friend. Kay touched my arm gently. "Descent," she said. I blinked. Outside, dawn had trimmed the horizon in silver. We dropped out of the dark. The runway rose to meet us. Wheels touched, soft as a promise kept. As we slowed, my phone shook to life. Signal raced back in like a tide, notifications stacked. "Ms. Delgado, I'm outside. Ben from Night Star, thank you for flying Quiet Skis. Aunt Joan, call me now. Unknown number, this is C. Harper, counsel for Joan Carter. Cease and desist. Maya, I need to tell you something, please." Kay handed me my coat. "Good luck," she said. "Thank you," I said, "for the sky." She smiled. "Bring some back down, okay? People need it." The air on the tarmac tasted like metal and new light. Another small building, another warm lobby. Ms. Delgado waited in a gray coat that managed to look both comfortable and powerful. Her hair was smooth, her eyes less so. Sharp. Awake. "How was it?" she asked as she hugged me, quick and clean. "Quiet," I said, like the app promised. Her mouth twitched. "Good, let's go make some noise." A black sedan with a driver who didn't ask questions took us through a town waking up. A bakery sign flicked on. A man in a reflective vest waved a slow hand as if blessing our car. The courthouse sat like a stone ship at the end of Main Street, columns pale in the first light. The flag wanted to stir and didn't yet. Inside, the hallways smelled like dust that had been cleaned. We were early. Early is a kind of power. Ms. Delgado guided me to a bench outside the clerk's office. "We file," she said. "We get a docket number, we ask for the duty judge, we breathe, we win." "Can you put that on a t-shirt?" I asked. My voice shook just enough to tell the truth. She smiled with half her mouth. "You don't need a shirt," she said. "You have a spine." The clerk unlocked the window at 7:59 and slid back the glass. Ms. Delgado's stack of papers made a sound like a small wave hitting the shore. The clerk stamped. Slide, stamp. Slide, stamp. I watched the ink pad. Dark, even, no doubts. At 8:17, a bailiff led us to a courtroom where the lights hummed and the wood gleamed. No spectators. It felt like a secret kept on purpose. The judge came in from a door behind the bench. He was younger than judges are in movies, with tired eyes and a tie the color of the sky outside. We stood. We sat. Ms. Delgado rose. The words "Your Honor" came out of her like a bell. She laid out the facts like stones on a river path. Clean, even, step here, step there. She did not perform. She did not plead. She presented. Aunt Joan's face did something I had never seen it do. It softened at the edges like a mask that had been worn too long was finally melting. She looked at me, really looked. "You're enjoying this," she said, but there was no heat in it, just tired. "I'm not," I said honestly. "I'm breathing for the first time in a year." She swallowed. Her hands let go of her purse. "I didn't think you'd keep going," she admitted. "I thought you'd make a scene and then soften." "I used to," I said. "Then I learned who that served." Ms. Patel cleared her throat. "We will schedule a full meeting next week to go over accounts," she said. "For now, you are all to do nothing except breathe and keep receipts. Do you understand?" We all nodded, even Aunt Joan. On the way out, in the hallway where the carpet swallowed footsteps, Ethan stepped from a doorway like a bad memory that forgot how to stay in the past. He had stubble. He looked tired in the way that comes from standing too long under your own reflection. "Olivia," he said, hands up empty like that meant something. "Please." I kept moving. "Counsel," I said, and it was not a weapon. It was a boundary. He moved to stand in front of me. "You don't even want to hear my side." "I did," I said. "Last year, in a kitchen, between pie and the phone where you texted my sister. I heard you. I believed you. It burned me. I learned." He blinked. "I never meant." "You meant to be comfortable," I interrupted. "You always do." Maya stepped forward. I felt her like a tide behind my shoulder. "Leave her alone," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Leave us both alone." She looked so much like the girl I shared a room with just then that I had to look away or drown. Ethan's eyes flicked between us. He nodded once, the way people nod when they've run out of tricks. He stepped back. "Good luck," he said. "You too," I replied, and I meant it. I want even my exes to find the sky, just not by stealing mine. We walked out together, me and my sister, Ms. Delgado behind us like a lighthouse with legs. Outside, the air bit. We laughed the way you laugh when you're so tired the only other option is to cry. "Farm?" Ms. Delgado asked. "I have a copy of the order in case anyone still believes this is pretend." "Farm," I said. I could feel the dirt under my shoes already, even in the city, even on carpet. The "for sale" sign was a splinter in the skin of the field. It shouldn't have been there. It had been hammered in during a week when no one asked Nana what she wanted. It leaned a little now, like even the earth objected. The farmhouse sat where it always had, white paint flacking in places, front porch tilting like a book confused by its own spine. The wind out there is always different. It doesn't come from any one direction. It arrives. It has stories in it. We pulled up, tires crunching gravel. Ms. Delgado killed the engine and looked at me, ready to read the order if we need it. I've been reading it in my head since dawn, I said. A silver SUV was already there. 2 people in long coats stood by the porch with clipboards. A third person, a woman with high heels that were a bad idea for dirt, pointed toward the barn. A realtor, a buyer's husband maybe. The scene looked like a transaction pretending to be a walk in the country. Ms. Delgado and I stepped out. A deputy's cruiser came down the lane behind us, lights off, engine tired. He parked, tipped his hat. "Ms. Delgado," he said. They knew each other. Of course they did. "Thanks for coming," she said. The realtor turned. She saw us and pasted on a smile. "Hi, we're just leaving," Ms. Delgado finished for her, tone kind enough that it almost felt like permission. The realtor laughed the way people laugh when they think laughing harder will make the thing they want true. "We have a scheduled showing." I pulled the folded paper from my coat pocket. I passed it to Ms. Delgado. She passed it to the deputy. He held it like a hymn. He cleared his throat and read. "By order of the court, all transfers, sales, and non-essential disbursements from the Carter Family Trust are temporarily restrained." The buyer sighed. The husband looked relieved, like he'd been dragged there. The realtor's smile lost its shine. "We'll reschedule," she said, peeking at the paper, then me. "You don't have to be rude." "I'm not being rude," I said. "I'm being legal." A car we knew too well appeared at the end of the lane like a character entering at the wrong time in a play. Aunt Joan. Her tires threw gravel like words thrown in a fight. She parked at a wild angle and stepped out, beige coat flapping like a flag that forgot which way wind moves. Her eyes found the sign first, then me. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Do you know how this looks?" "Like we're following a judge's order," Ms. Delgado said. "Which we are. Please tell your agent to leave." The realtor tried again. "We can just walk the property. No harm." "No harm is what people say when they're about to do harm," I said. The deputy's boots made a sound on the gravel like small thunder. "Ma'am," he said to the realtor, "time to go." They went, finally. The SUV turned around with a lot of extra steering. The dust they kicked up settled back down on the land like memory. Aunt Joan stood in the lane and looked at the farmhouse like it had betrayed her. "You're ruining everything," she said quietly. "You have no idea what it's like to keep a family standing when the wind wants to knock it down." I stepped closer, not to fight, to be heard. "It isn't your job to keep us standing by breaking the floor," I said. I pointed to the porch, the boards that needed replacing, the stairs that needed a handrail. "This house doesn't need guests," I said. "It needs care." The deputy took a slow walk around the porch. He ran a hand along the railing, gentle, like it was a shoulder. "Saw this place when I was a kid," he said. "You had goats." 3, I said. "Daisy, Star, Trouble." The last one named himself. Aunt Joan's shoulders dropped a fraction. "I remember the goats," she murmured before she could stop herself. For a second, she was a girl in the driveway again, holding a bucket, yelling at me to hurry up before Mom saw the dirt on our shoes. Then she remembered she was the queen again and pulled her face back on. "I'm not the villain you want me to be," she said. "I don't want you to be a villain," I said. "I want you to be honest." She made a small sound. "You think honesty buys groceries?" "No," I said. "Work buys groceries. We all know how to do that. We forgot." The wind moved through the grass in a ripple like a big hand smoothing rumpled sheets. I walked to the "For Sale" sign. The bolts were cold under my fingers. The last time I unscrewed something at this farm, I was 14 and determined to take apart a broken hose reel just to see how it worked. Grandpa had come out, sat beside me, and told me the story of how he built the fence post by post. "You don't have to know the whole field to set the first post," he'd said. "You just have to be brave enough to start." I took my time, one bolt, then the other. The sign shivered, then loosened, then leaned like someone ready to sit down after a long day. I pulled it free and laid it gently in the bed of the truck like a thing that had done its job and didn't need to be here anymore. I handed the wooden stake to Aunt Joan. "You can keep this," I said. "A reminder, not a weapon." She stared at it like she didn't know what it was. She held it like it might burn. She didn't drop it. She didn't hold it up. She just held it. Ms. Delgado's phone buzzed. She checked, looked at me. "Ms. Patel says the locksmith will be here in an hour to check the locks," she said, "and a contractor she trusts can come by Monday to look at the porch." Warm relief spread under my coat. "We're really doing this," I whispered, mostly to myself. "We are," Ms. Delgado said, "one board at a time." A car door opened. I turned, ready to fight air if I had to, but it was not a fight. It was Nana, in the passenger seat of Dad's truck, wrapped in her blue scarf, eyes bright as creek water. Dad rounded the front of the truck and helped her to the ground. She had insisted on coming. Of course she had. She walked slow, each step a conversation with the earth. When she reached the porch, she put her hand on the rail. "Old girl," she whispered to the house, "we're still here." I stepped up beside her. "We are." She looked at me, her eyes full of something that most people call pride, but to me feels like permission. "You did it," she said. "You chose the noise that mattered." Behind us, Maya walked down the drive with Mom. Mom carried a thermos. Steam curled from the lid. She poured into paper cups and handed them around like communion. We stood there, a knot of people who had done things wrong and right and were now trying to do the next thing right. Even Aunt Joan stood, stake in hand, not knowing where to set it down yet. The wind was kinder now. The light more honest. I walked down the steps into the yard. The grass brushed against my boots like a blessing. I took my phone out of my pocket and opened the Quiet Skis app. No flight to book. No bell. Just a background image of a sky and our line. Fly smarter, not louder. I turned the screen to the house and smiled. "We changed what private means," I said out loud to no one and everyone. "Now it means quiet and kind." Time did what it does when you let it. It moved forward. 90 days later, the accounting lay on Ms. Patel's desk like a map of rivers that had overflowed and then been coaxed back into their banks. Money we thought was gone wasn't all gone. Some spent on things that made sense, repairs, taxes. Some spent on things that didn't, fees that were favors. Consulting that looked like a new handbag. Ms. Patel moved through it with her quiet knife, not bleeding anyone, just trimming the lies. Aunt Joan stepped down as trustee officially. She didn't fight it. She signed the paper with a pen that shook and then lay flat when it was done, like a bird after a long flight. The court accepted Ms. Patel as permanent trustee. The farm wasn't sold. The porch got a new handrail that fit Nana's hand. The bedroom window stuck less. The goats are still a story, but I think about goats again and smile. Uncle Paul softened around the edges like a winter that gives way to a slow spring. He took up fishing the way some men take up church. He says less. He listens more. Sometimes that's enough. Derek lost his job for a while. He called me one night in January and said, "They said it wasn't about you, but we both know it was." I didn't gloat. I said, "Make it about you in the right way now." He said he didn't know how. I said, "Start by not taking what isn't yours." He laughed once, a real laugh, small and a little ashamed. "Okay," he said. "Okay." JetShare sent us a letter in February with words like apology and misunderstanding, and we commit. We didn't post it. We didn't need to. We changed our tagline's legal standing from applied to registered. Ethan's name disappeared from their website like it had been a smudge on a window. I heard he took a job in another city. I wish him peace. I don't wish us back to before. And Quiet Skis, we launched a program called Nana Lights. For every 10 empty leg seats booked, we cover one seat for a caregiver who needs to travel fast and can't afford it. Nurses on emergency flights home. Daughters who need to get to a parent. Sons who need to bring someone to treatment. The first person we flew under Nana Lights, Ms. Nguyen, the nurse from that night, we sent her to her sister, in a storm that would have kept her on the ground for a day. She sent a photo of her hand on the oval window with the caption, "3 squeezes, we made it." The app stayed small on purpose. We didn't chase explosions. We chased quiet. We built a team that didn't like stealing. We posted our code of ethics on our site like a flag. We held our own line even when investors wanted to turn our bell into a siren. Thanksgiving came again, like it does. This time the table was not Aunt Joan. It was ours. Not mine, ours. At the farm. The porch newly strong. The lights strung from tree to tree like fallen stars. We ate at long tables we borrowed from the church, not matching, not fancy, laid with quilt pieces under bowls so the wood wouldn't stain. People came, the ones who chose truth. Mom with her hair loose like she had remembered it could be pretty just for her. Dad in a sweater that made him look like the man he was when he danced with her in kitchens. Ms. Delgado in jeans, a chow with a pie she admitted was store-bought but in a dish she would never confess was not. Ms. Patel, who said she didn't eat dessert and then ate 2 desserts to be polite. Ben from Night Star drove in with his wife. Kay sent a video of her jump seat, clouds flashing by, with a message we played on a portable speaker. Save me a plate, be there next year. Maya stood beside me, elbows touching. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. She had begun to volunteer with Nana Lights once a week, reviewing applications, choosing stories that sounded like ours before we knew how to tell them. She had stopped wearing the kind of makeup you put on to look like someone else. She wore the kind that lets your face look like yours. Aunt Joan came late. She walked up the gravel with her shoulders not quite so high. She carried a casserole like an offering. People always think offerings have to be speeches or apologies that use words like accountability. Sometimes they're green beans with toasted onion crumbs on top. She stood at the edge of the lights and looked unsure. I walked to her. There's a place, I said. I didn't think you'd, she began. I'm not building a prison, I said softly. I'm building a table. She nodded, tears making her eyes shine. I don't know who I am, she admitted. Start with honest, I said. The rest will come. Later, when the plates were scraped and the night was full, Nana asked me to bring her coat. She wanted to walk, she said, to the edge of the field. I took her arm. We moved slow. The grass breathed. The stars were bright like the past, and the future and the now had all decided to be friends for once. We stopped by the fence. The wire hummed softly. She squeezed my hand 3 times. I love you. I squeezed back. I love you too. We stood there, 2 women who had carried fire and water and most of the heavy things you can carry. We said nothing for a long time. We didn't need to. The quiet sky inside me was louder than any bell. If you're still with me, if you're here at the end of this long road, here's what I want you to take into your own night. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep anyone's house warm. You don't have to stay at a table that feeds you lies and calls it love. You can walk out the front door, even if your hands shake, and still be the kindest person in the room. You can build something quiet. You can make it strong. You can invite the ones who choose truth to sit by the light with you. Justice can sound like a bell. Revenge doesn't have to sound like a scream. Sometimes the best revenge is a life built so honest it leaves the people who broke you speechless. When my phone buzzed that first night in Aunt Joan's dining room, it wasn't a flex. It was a promise kept, to Nana, to the girl I used to be, to the woman I am. It was the sound of my power finally ringing in my own hands. And the next time laughter met me at a door, it didn't cut. It made a little breeze. I walked through it, shoulders back, and carried my sky with me. The light doesn't ask permission to arrive. It just comes, let it, then share it. To everyone who's ever walked into a room alone and felt the eyes and the laughs and the weight of being underestimated, remember, you might be walking in alone, but you are not empty. You are not a question mark. You are a bell. And when you ring, ring for the ones who can't yet. Ring for the ones who raised you. Ring for yourself. Ring, and then let the quiet come back in like the best kind of home.